Today I'm going to talk to you about the last evolution of the brutish TR models, cars that can trace their roots back to the 50s. So much so that this one was antiquated even when it was new, except in one area where it used cutting-edge technology that was at that point dominating Formula One. Strange that such an antiquated car should have that, but even stranger that that was the area that caused all the problems. Today we're going to find out more about that story, how it drives, and what it's like to buy and own as a classic. In the 50s and 60s, Michelotti did all of Triumph's designs, but at this point in time, he was too busy. So the task of updating the TR5 was given to Karmann, the makers of the gear. Triumph typically were short of money, so the brief was to only restyle the front and the back of the car. The A-pillar and the doors are the most expensive bits to change, so they were left unaltered. Karmann did a great job making the car look far more modern, but I have to say, for me personally, it can't quite match the TR5's British Bruiser perfection. Mechanically, it got a thicker anti-roll bar and that's it. That was the only change. This car was ancient still with separate chassis and body construction, which makes the contrast with what is under the bonnet even more remarkable. A bit like fitting Brembos to an ox cart. The big innovation was Lucas mechanical fuel injection. Incredible in a car that was otherwise really well behind the times. It allowed the 2.5 litre straight six, which is still a pushrod engine, to produce 150 horsepower, which was good enough for 0 to 60 in 8.2 seconds, and 119 mile an hour top speed, which is very quick for that time. Unfortunately though, it had a terrible reputation. Now the injection system itself is very, very good, and it dominated Formula One in the 70s. But there were two problems that made it very difficult to live with on this car. The first was down to the fuel pump. Now it was located just about here in the boot next to the fuel tank. The problem was that to make it, they basically converted a windscreen wiper motor, and it just wasn't man enough for the job. Perhaps as damaging though was that nobody knew how to set it up properly, often giving up and just telling owners to move over to carbs. The engine was softened on post-1973 cars to make it more drivable. Now the thing is though, the power went from 150 to 125 horsepower. In reality, the difference isn't as big as it sounds, because at the same time, they changed the way that they were measuring it. So in reality, it maybe lost 10 horsepower. Despite its antique separate chassis construction, the TR6 was a hit, selling 94,000 in its production run from 1968 to 1976, and 77,000 of those went to the US. It's incredible that they managed to sell so many in America. Firstly, the emission standards they had over there meant that they were sent over with a paltry 100 horsepower. Secondly, it was sold alongside the 240Z, a much better car. Perhaps the fact that the latter wasn't available as a convertible saved the little Triumph. Inside, this is pretty much identical to the TR5. Now, some have reported that the driving position feels different with the wheel in a different place, but since the chassis and the mechanicals are pretty much identical, that's unlikely. More likely to do with some of the later versions that got different seats, changing the way it felt. Before we set off, just a couple of very curious details. Only the cars from the first year, like this one, came with this particular steering wheel with those holes. Now the reason is supposed to be that American dealers complained that their clients were getting their fingers stuck in those holes. Now I can see how that would happen, but anyway, later wheels were actually made with a slot instead. Also, this one has a beautiful filler here. It's lovely, metal, shiny, with a little catch there. It's a really nice thing, but later cars didn't have it. The reason was that if it rolled, it's quite likely that something would touch the catch, it would open up, and as you're rolling, fuel would go everywhere. So, bit of a safety hazard. Steve, who owns this one, is a TR guru and has made sure that it is as accurate as it can be. so much so that it was used as the basis for a Corgi model. Now, he's also a mobile mechanic, so if you need anything for your own Triumphs and other sort of British cars of this era, I'll put his details in the video description. Another rare feature for this car is the wheels. Now, ordinarily what you'd have on a TR6 are those wide banded steelies with that thick lip, which I think look great. They're quite aggressive and also they suit the modern design of the car quite well. But what this has is hugely desirable, and that is the Ross style type wheel. So I think that's the same as the earlier cars, but in the sizes that they are on this, they're very, very rare. And I've just been told by Steve that if you find them, they're about £1,000 a set. They also have a tendency to make a bit of a vibrating noise when you're going over sort of bumps and so on, which is why he's put tie wraps on them. Pre-73 cars like this one are supposed to be a little bit spikier in their delivery, a little bit more difficult to drive. But I think conversely, there's a little bit of extra power and they're supposed to be more exciting. So let's see how it feels going through the gears. Gearbox is nice and meaty and clunky. It's not fast, but you know you're changing gear. It's got a really nice solid engagement to it. Well, that is absolutely lovely. I'm slowing down because I'm worried you won't be able to hear what I'm saying, because there is quite a lot of buffeting in this cabin coming through. But that straight six, I know it well now. I've run it in more than one car while I was doing videos, and it's just beautiful. It's so torquey, so linear. Doesn't seem to have any spikes. It just keeps climbing in power as you go up through the revs. I changed up at 5,000 there. I think you could go to 5.5. That's where the red line is, and it would probably keep on pulling. But it's a really lovely unit. Interesting thing again about this unique, well not unique, but rare steering wheel is it should have a cover of some type. So this is incredibly thin. It's a bit too thin really, but I think for a car like this that you need to manhandle, I think it has normally a stitched leather covering, something like that. Steve's, at the moment, he's left it like this. He quite likes the delicacy that it imparts, and I can see where he's coming from. Now, being sold well into the sort of mid to late 70s, it must have really felt by that stage like quite a primitive thing. And when you're driving it, it doesn't let you forget, because the steering does lighten up at speed, but it never loses the heft quite. And the clutch is pretty heavy, the gearbox is bulky. I mean, it's a car that you have to drive. The interior is really simple. That has its own charms, of course, but everything's pretty easy to find. Those switches are all pretty clear, although that one, which is for this is to direct the air up or below. And initially I couldn't quite see how it was showing that. But you can see there's a little steering wheel and a seat. Then you got ventilation, so the fan for the heating. This is to switch heating on or off. And then the choke. So pretty simple. The switches for the wipers are here. Now this, interestingly, this wooden dashboard, normally that's veneer. But because it cracks, Steve has just used a solid panel of wood, but got exactly the same texture and everything, and put that in. Funny to see though, how in those days still Triumph had bare exposed wood screws showing. Other than that, you've got vinyl. We were having a conversation earlier about whether you call this leatherette or vinyl. Either way, it's definitely vinyl. It's not unpleasant, and it's what the car used to have. I think having leather in a way would almost maybe spoil it. It would just be too rich for this. These weren't super expensive cars. Now, something to be appreciated is that they can be driven slowly. You don't have to try and drive it fast. You can poodle along and the torque just sort of wafts you along. The ride is quite decent as well. Let's just take it through the gears once more, and then we'll talk about things like costs and stuff to look out for if you're going to buy one. Turning circle, brilliant. That engine's just a beauty, and it's got such a deep sort of sound to it, a deep growl. And you know, there isn't much precision, and it drops quite far in when you're taking the corners. Let's see what it's like here on the tighter ones. I think I'm gonna just leave it in third because it's so torquey, it can just deal with it. Yeah, they're not cars to be thrown around. It feels like it's in its happy place right now. Just sort of threading through this road at 50 miles an hour, top gear, overdrive isn't even engaged. We can pop that on and that's it, and the engine note goes even a tad lower. And then you're just treading in, changing direction gently, and it feels beautiful. If you're interested in buying one, well then it's mainly good news. Mechanically they're tough and parts are readily available. You've got to watch out for the usual rust, like you do on any car of this era. So footwells on the body, behind the rear wheels, all the usual places, but also you need to check the frame, where the differential mounts, as well as the suspension pickup points at the back. Crucial that they are sound, because doing a restoration or fixing that is really quite expensive. In terms of what you should be paying, well, I think that projects are around the £10,000 mark for a usable car, 15 to 20, and the very best cars 30,000. And that seems like really good value to me, and they are significantly cheaper than their older brothers, the TR5. Many people say that this is the last of the real TRs, and kind of agree really. I've got nothing against a TR7, but it just doesn't provide the same feeling and the same emotion as this more raw car does. If you like a car that requires commitment, a little bit like a wild horse, then the TR6 is the car for you.